everybody, welcome to this episode of Quick Stitches and Tips. My name is Rohn Strong, and I'm going to show you guys how to work an invisible horizontal seam in crochet. It's so cool. Let's get started. All you're going to need is a couple pieces of crochet that you want to practice your horizontal seams on, some contrasting yarn. I recommend contrasting it first so you can kind of see where things are, and a tapestry needle. That's it. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to lay my two pieces next to one another, and I'm going to seam these two sides right here together. I'm going to grab my contrasting yarn and thread my tapestry needle. Now, I'm going to work from the bottom up. I'm going to insert my needle into the back loop of the first stitch. Then I'm going to insert my needle into the back loop of the first stitch on the other piece of crochet, in this case a granny square, and I'm going to pull, but I'm not going to pull tight. I'm just going to pull. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the back loop of the next stitch on the first swatch, the back loop of the next stitch on the second swatch, back loop of the next stitch on the first swatch, and I just keep going like this, working only into the back loops. Now you'll notice that when I get to a chain, which because these are granny squares, there's chains in between each of these double crochets, again, I'm just going to work into the back loop of the chain on the first swatch and the second swatch. Now back to my double crochets, working only into the back loops. And you can even kind of pick them up at the same time. Just make sure you're threading every single stitch and you don't miss a stitch. If you miss a stitch, what will end up happening is your seam will be a little wonky, and nobody wants that. All right, so now that I've seamed the correct number of stitches, I'm going to go ahead and pull tight and just hold my stitches and that yarn there. And watch. My pieces join together and create a beautiful invisible seam. Now, where would you use this? I would use it at the shoulder of a piece, like if I was working a crochet sweater. This is a great seam to use at the shoulders because that's usually where you have stitches kind of next to one another where you can work into the back loops. I would use this on an afghan, like with this. I'm using two granny squares. I would totally do this with an afghan if I wanted the pattern to kind of continue and I didn't want a harsh join to kind of distract the eye from the pattern, such as in these two granny squares here, where I wanted the diamond to continue from one into the next. All right, so let me pull one more time. Oh, it's so satisfying. I love it. Now, on this, you can obviously, there are parts in the seam where you can see the green. You can't see it too well, but you kind of can. So in this case, I wanted to use the contrasting color so you could kind of see where I was going with the stitches. So use a yarn color that matches the seam that you're trying to sew, so that way you can't really see the yarn through the stitches. That's pretty important. But it creates a nice sturdy seam that is actually really, really strong. And that's what you want at a shoulder. You don't want something that's going to be weak, especially at the shoulder, because what ends up happening is your piece kind of falls flat. Now, a lot of people would say, well, Ron, why wouldn't you single crochet or slip stitch across at the shoulders to join your sweater? You can totally do that. But in more delicate pieces, such as like a lace sweater or anything like that, having a big bulky seam right here, it's just not my favorite thing. And so working this creates a nice flat seam. And again, if you want that pattern to kind of continue and look like it's flowing and it's seamless and it's invisible over the shoulders, this is a great option. And as well here, when I'm working with the Afghan squares, this pattern is able to continue from one into the next. And so it creates this really beautiful design. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me on this really quick episode of Quick Stitches and Tips, where we learned how to do an invisible horizontal seam in crochet. I'm Rohn Strong for Annie's, and we'll see you guys next time.